This conference will now be recorded.
Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to discuss creating the S3 static website using the GitHub Actions. So we know that AWS S3 service supports the static website hosting where we can host the static content of the web pages, and using the GitHub Actions, how we can push the changes to the web application or website to the S3 bucket. So that's what we are going to discuss today, and we will do the a lab here. So what are the different steps that we are going to do here? So let us look at. We are going to first we are going to identify the base project. We are going to identify the base project, that is our HTML or maybe a static web content. In this case, we are going to take some HTML project or maybe HTML along with some CSS and the JavaScript or whatever it is. So we are going to take some base project here. Then we are going to create an S3 bucket and configure the static hosting. So then we are going to create a new repository in your GitHub account, because we are going to push all our project into your GitHub repository from the GitHub. Using the GitHub Actions, it push it to the S3 bucket. So the content of the website is going to sync to the S3 bucket. Then, and we are going to create a GitHub Actions workflow. Then we are going to push the code to the repository. Then we are going to test your static website. So these are all the steps that we are going to perform here. And what is the prerequisite here? So you need to have the GitHub account. Okay, what are the prerequisites? You need to have the AWS account and you need to have the GitHub account. So these are the two prerequisites. Fine. So first, if you have any base project, you can take that base project. But in this case, what I'm doing, I'm going to take some uh, here. There is some free website is available here, which I'm going to take it. Okay, this is what I'm going to take it. I'm going to share this in the description. Okay, so base project, this is what we are taking here. Okay, fine. So here you can download any of these projects here. These are all the static content. In my case, let me download this one. Okay, let me download this one, and these are all the HTML pages. Okay, download. Fine. So now what I'm going to do, I'll create a folder that is like my local repository, or maybe I can I can make this as a folder. So let me go to the downloads folder. Let me go to the downloads folder here. This is my downloads folder, and this is the what it is downloaded. I'm going to extract it. Okay, fine. So this is my fine. So these are my files. Okay, so these are my files. So what is a folder name here? So if you look at what is a folder name here, this is the folder name, Oxer-HTML. Okay, fine. So if you wanted to keep this as it is, you can keep it, or if you wanted to change it to some meaningful name, you can change it. So probably what we can do, maybe let us keep it as it is. Okay, let us keep it as it is. So now here, that is a base project which we already created. So let me open the git bash here. Let me open the git bash. So open git bash here. Okay, so this is where the git bash is open here. Fine. So now I can look at here. Fine. So this is my all the HTML content here. So we have the images, we have the index.html, we have the blog, we have the about. So these are all the different files here. So what is the next step here? next step is create an S3 bucket and configure the static hosting here. So let me log into my AWS account here. I'm going to the AWS account. I have a AWS free tier account. I'm going to my AWS account here. Okay, fine. So I'm going to the S3. This is my S3 service. I'm going to create a bucket. So I'm going to create a bucket. So let us say create bucket, and I'm creating the bucket in the Northern Virginia region. The bucket type is a general purpose. Okay. So what is the name of the bucket? What I can give here? Uh, Static HTML website. Okay, this is the bucket name I am giving here, but you guys can give whatever the bucket name you want. So we have some certain rules, like a bucket name should be unique across the world, and what is that? Static HTML website bucket. Bucket name should be unique, and the bucket name should not have any capital letters. So that is the reason I have given all the lowercase letters. Then what are the other properties that we are going to select here? Object of ownership. This we will come back later. Then the bucket should be a public bucket. By default, all the buckets are a private buckets. The bucket should be a public bucket. So I'm unchecking this. So to make sure my bucket is a public bucket, because I'm allowing others to access the web pages uploaded into the bucket. So the bucket should be a public bucket. Then what else I have here? Versioning. That is, again, it is not a mandatory. If you want, you can enable the versioning. And the tags is also not mandatory. Encryption is also not a mandatory. Okay, fine. So the only mandatory thing what I did is the bucket, uh, I made it a public. Okay, fine. So now I created this bucket. I created this bucket here. Fine. Now the second step is also completed. What is the bucket name here? We already given this as the bucket name here. We have the created a bucket and configure static hosting. Static hosting is something. Let us do it. Okay, let us do it. We can do it now, or we can do it later. We can do it now itself. Okay, so let us open the bucket here. This is the bucket where I can go to the properties. If you come to the bottom of this page, if you come to the bottom of this page, where you can see the static website hosting. So this is what I'm going to enable it, edit, enable the static website hosting. When you enable it, what it is asking here, it is, you can look at here. What is the index document? That is what is the default landing page of the website. So I'm giving the index.html. Then what is the error document? Error document is nothing but I'm giving error.html here. That means these two pages are the mandatory pages when we are enabling the static website hosting using the S3 bucket. So that means whenever you're accessing this particular URL, there should be a default landing page. And if you're accessing something which is not available, I'm trying to access the services.html or careers.html. If those pages are not available, it is going to show the error page. So that is the reason you should have the two pages mandatory. So these are the names that I have given, but you can give any names here, index.html and the error.html. So now then create the save changes here. When I save the changes, you can look at here, there should be a URL. You can look at here, this is the my static website URL. That means once you have published your application into the bucket, this is the URL which you are going to to access your website. Fine. And there is one more thing here. When we create the bucket, bucket is a private bucket. Okay. At the same time, whatever the files that you have uploaded to the bucket, all the files are also a private files. Okay. So you need to make them public so that your users will be able to access the static website from their browsers. For that, we are going to add the bucket policy. We are going to add the bucket policy. There are two ways that we can provide the public access. One is using the ACLs, that is the access control list. The second one is the bucket policy. Access control list is something you have to do every time someone uploads a file to the bucket, which you have to do it manually, whereas bucket policy is something you can create. So let us look at the bucket policy. This is the bucket policy. Okay, so you can create the bucket policy using the visual editor or using the JSON, and this is a bucket policy. What is that we are doing here? Allow and principal star is nothing but for everyone, and what kind of permission you are giving? Get object, that is a read permission for all the files. On which resource you are giving? You are giving in a bucket. What is the bucket name here? This is my bucket name. Okay, fine. So now let me go back to my policy here, replace this with the bucket. Fine, this is my bucket policy. So now I'm going back to the bucket. I'm going back to the bucket here. Then we have the permissions. Then when you come down here, there is a bucket policy, edit bucket policy. Okay, fine. So add the bucket policy here. Then simply click on the save. Fine. So we have completed the step 1 and we have completed the step 2 here. Okay, so create S3 bucket and configure static website hosting. Also, okay, also create and attach bucket policy. Okay, bucket policy. So now what is the step number 3? Create a new repository in your GitHub account. Create a new repository in GitHub account. So we should have a GitHub account. I have the GitHub account. I'm going to the github.com. github.com. Okay, fine. So now here, what is a repository that I can create? You can give any name here, but in this case, I'm just giving the same name as our web pages, oxer-html. This is the name I'm giving here. And this is the GitHub repository. New, and create the repository. Okay, fine. So the description is optional. It is a public repository, and I don't want to add any README file or gitignore file here. So I'm simply creating the repository. Okay, fine. So now, once I have created this repository, what is that we are going to do here? Let us go to the settings here. Let us go to the settings. And before that, let us copy this command and keep it ready, because we are going to push our code from the local repository to the GitHub remote repository. So we need to execute these commands. These commands we can execute at any point of time. Okay, let us keep it aside. These commands will keep it aside. Okay, fine. So now, first what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go to the settings here. I'm going to go to the settings here. There is a secrets and the variables. Secrets and the variables here. You can look at here. See, basically, what I'm trying to do here it is, see, GitHub Actions workflow is going to trigger whenever there is a push to the GitHub repository. That is, whenever there is a changes in your local repository and pushes the changes to the remote repository, that's where this workflow is going to be triggered. And this workflow is going to connect to AWS from the GitHub account and copy all the files from the GitHub repository into the S3 bucket. That's what it is going to happen. Okay, that's what it is going to happen. So for that, you need some authentication from the GitHub account to connect to the AWS. That is where we are configuring the authentication credentials. So secrets and the variables, actions. Okay, actions. Now you can look at here, we are going to create the secrets here. New repository secret. New repository secret here. So now here we need a authentication to AWS account for which we are going to create the username and the password. Okay. So I'm going again to the AWS. I'm go to the IAM. IAM is nothing but identity and access management, where we can create the users. So now I go to the users here. I'll create the I'll create the user. I'll create the user. Maybe I can say website user. You can give whatever the name that you want. This user really doesn't need any console permission. So I simply next and attach policies. And what kind of policy we need for this user? We need a, what is that? At least S3 full access. S3 full access is nothing but this user is going to connect to S3 bucket and copy the files from the GitHub account to the S3. Okay, fine. So that is where we are going to attach the S3 permissions. Okay, so meantime, what are the users? What is it? What are the keys that we are going to look at here? This is the access key ID. Okay, this is the access key ID. It is taking a lot of time. This is the key, and why it is taking a lot of time here? Let me come back. Users, leave this page. Continue. Users. Okay, create user. You can use any user here. Web user. Okay, next attach policies directly. Okay, now Amazon S3 full access. This is the permission I am giving here. This is the policy I am giving here. That means this user should have the full access on the Amazon S3, where we are going to copy the files into the S3 bucket from the GitHub account. So once we created this user, I'm going back to this user and we are going to generate the access keys. Where are the access keys here? These are the access keys. CLI and what is this? I understand. Okay, fine. So now this is the access key, which I am going to store in the GitHub account. So this is the AWS access key ID and this is the value. Okay, add secret, and we are going to add one more thing here. We are going to add one more thing, that is we like a username and the password, we have the access key and the secret access key, and this is the second key here. This is the second key, name, paste it, then value, this is the value. Fine. So we have created the access key and the secret key. Okay, fine. So that means what are the steps that we completed till now? And yeah, so we completed the step number 1, created the base project. Step number 2, created S3 bucket and configured the static hosting along with attaching the bucket policy. Step number 3, create a new repository in your GitHub account. Okay. Then step number 4, create GitHub Actions workflow. Okay, fine. So how we are going to create the actions? So now, if you look at here, this is a folder. This is our folder where we have the static application. So we are going to create the actions here. We are going to create the folder. What is the folder we are going to create here? .github .github, then workflows, then actions. Okay, dot GitHub workflows actions. Even G also small here. G also small here. Okay, so that is what we are going to create here. Fine. So now let us create that. Let us create that. So dot GitHub actions workflow. Fine. So it is a dot. Fine. What is that we have created here? Dot GitHub workflows, not the actions, main.yml. This is the file which is going to trigger. Okay, dot GitHub workflows main.yml. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a directory mkdir dot GitHub. Okay, dot GitHub. Now then what is that? cd dot GitHub. Then again mkdir workflows. Okay, then in this we are going to create the main.yaml file. Main.yaml file. Let us look at how this YAML file is going to look at. You can look at here. This is the main.yaml file. So this is the file which is going to trigger. So on push branches main. That means whenever there is a push on the main branch, what is the job it is going to run here? Okay, fine. So these are all the GitHub Actions related commands. Configure AWS credentials. This is what the credentials we configured. It is going to fetch that, and the region is US East 1 because we created the bucket in the US East 1 region. But again, you can change accordingly, whatever the region that you have created the bucket. So now run AWS S3 sync dot slash public. Public is a folder that we have given here, but in our case we basically we don't have any folder. Otherwise, just to make it simple, instead of copying everything, so we can just simply create the folder public and move everything to the public here. So now what i can do first, let us create the main.yaml. What is our bucket name here? Our bucket name is this one. Our bucket name is this one, and let us change this to here. Okay, fine. So now what I'm doing here, let me create this file main.yml. Main.yml. You can use V editor, or you can use the notepad and save it in this folder, whatever that is you're familiar, you can do that. So I created the main.yml. So now I'm going to move everything to the public. So just to make it simple, that there is nothing else, just to make it simple. mkdir public. Okay, ls copy star.html. Just move it. It's not the copy. Move star.html. Then what is that? css, then images, then js, images, then js. Everything I'm moving it to the public folder. Okay, fine. So now ls minus la. Okay, even .github also we need to move it to the public folder. Okay, ls minus la public folder, cd public ls minus la. Fine. So we have everything here. We have everything here. So now what are the next steps we have here? We are going to we are going to push our code to the we are going to push our code to the repository. So this is our my local repository. This is my local repository, and we are going to initialize this as a git local repository using the git space init command. Okay, so this is where we can look at here. There is a .git folder is going to be created. So then to push this to the our GitHub remote repository, we are going to execute these commands. We are going to execute these commands which we have copied from the GitHub when we created the new repository. Okay, fine. So main branch. Fine. What it says, main does not match any. Okay, failed to push some reference to this particular external auxer hyphen html dot git. Okay, let us look at this. What is the issue here? Git status, then the public. Oh, okay, fine. I think I did a mistake here. Okay, fine. So what is the mistake that I did? Git space add space dot. This is the process that we should follow. Git space commit space minus m. Okay, static website. Okay, then I should use the git push command. Fine. So these are the sequence that I should follow here. So now if I type the git space status, so now everything is up to date. So now if I go here and I go to my repository, this is my repository. Okay, fine. So now this is my repository and this is all the folders. So now when I pushed it, the GitHub Actions workflow should trigger, and it should copy all the files into the S3 bucket. Let us look at here. There is a actions here. There is a actions. So now what are the actions that it performed here? We can look at here. Where is my project? This is my project. So GitHub Actions. Okay, fine. So let me check here. Where is my S3 bucket? This is my S3 bucket. Let me go back to S3. Let me open in the new tab. Fine. So this is my S3 bucket. Okay, it is not yet copied. Okay, it is not yet copied. Let me see. Let me see here what I'm going to do. CD public ls. Maybe let me create some echo. There is some error. Please contact admin. Error.html. Okay, fine. So now what I'm doing here, git add, then git commit minus m, error page added, then git push. Okay, fine. Now let us look at where is my GitHub. So this is my GitHub, and this is the repository public, and we have all the pages here, including the error page. Now if I look at here, actions, let me go and check in the S3. Okay, what did I miss here? So we went to the settings here. We went to the secrets, actions. We went to the secrets and the variables, and we configured the secrets and the variables here. Secrets and the variables, actions. So this is what we configured: AWS access key ID and AWS secret access key. Both are configured. Then where is our YAML file here? Public, okay, dot GitHub workflows, then main.yml. Okay, this is the key ID. This is a secret key. And what is the region here? In which region we created? Northern Virginia region. That is true. Then here dot slash public to S3 static HTML website. This is the bucket. Fine. Everything looks okay. And we don't see any errors also here. When I go to the actions, fine. So just give me a second. Let me debug it. What is the error here? Fine. So one thing what I observed here it is here if you type ls space ls la dot github folder should be outside. So move dot github should be outside. Fine. So now if I look at ls minus la, okay, this is how it should look like. Okay, so the dot github folder should be outside of the public, and we have the dot github workflows, then the main.yml. So now what I'm going to do, git space add space dot here, then git space commit space minus m, okay, add some comment here, moved what is it, workflows. Okay, then git push. Fine. So now let us look at whether the actions is triggered or not. Let us look at here. Where is my, this is my folder, and yes, and where is my actions? This is the actions. Okay, fine. So now you can look at here. Now actions is triggered. Actions is triggered now. It is a success. Then let me go to the S3 bucket, and if I refresh this one, I have these files. I have these files. So now, where is my static website URL? This is my static website URL, and I access this. I go to here, I paste it. Okay, this is basically, it is accessible. I think it is still yes. Okay, this is my static website hosted in the S3 bucket. So from here onwards, whenever you made any changes to your website, web pages, push it to the GitHub, the actions is going to be triggered and it is going to be synced to the S3 bucket, and it gets reflected on the website. So this is how we can create the S3 static website using the GitHub actions. Please leave a comment if you guys have any questions. Thank you for watching this video.